Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. That guy right there is Vince Adair. He is our football analyst at irishbreakdown.com. And Vince, we're 3 days away from Notre Dame versus Oklahoma State. It's the Fiesta Bowl. It is the first game of the Marcus Freeman era and all the things that go along with that. And, you know, we've kind of talked about how the teams stack up on paper and how the matchups are. And for this show, and we're going to follow, this is going to be part of a two-part show. Okay. Part one, we're going to focus on the Notre Dame offense, and then we're going to talk about the defense. But we're going to kind of get a little bit more into the specifics of the Notre Dame team and sort of who the guys are that we feel that we're going to have our eye on as far as who we think can have really the biggest impact of this game. And we could really make a case for all 11 starters and some backups and, oh, this guy has to play and that guy has to play well. But guys that we feel are not only vital to success, but maybe guys who aren't as consistently dominant, right? So we're not going to put Michael Mayer in there. That's someone who we will not discuss in the show because we kind of know he's going to be pretty good. Plus, I don't necessarily think Michael Mayer has to have a big game because I think that Oklahoma State could try to take him out of the game with double coverage, which I think they're going to do. Tommy Rees talked about that yesterday.
If they don't, it would be suspect as to what they're doing with their game plan.
Correct. And Notre Dame's going to have a big game, right?
Right.
But so, okay, then what happens next? Who has to step up really for Notre Dame to be successful? And we go a lot of different directions, but we came up with four guys. Well, let's three guys in one position.
There you go.
All right.
Because we always fudge the rules a little bit because that's what we do.
And we can do that because it's okay. It's you know, we make the rules. I make the rule, you second it, and we're all good.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So let's start off with, I think, a really important battle. And we could spend a whole show talking about the individual matchups of the offensive line. I think the guy that we're most going to be focused on as far as who could have a big impact in the game, positively or negatively, is freshman Blake Fisher.
Absolutely.
And I think he is a guy to me because of, number one, his talent and the potential he showed early in the season and then in fall camp and in spring. You think, boy, you know, Blake Fisher, he's going to be dominant. He's so talented. But again, this is a guy that hasn't played football in 3 months.
Right.
And then you talk about the matchup where he's now being thrown into the fire. For his first collegiate game, it was like, you know, hey, Blake, here's Jermaine Johnson, who's going to be a top, day 1, day 2 draft pick for Florida State. Welcome to college football.
Right.
Oh, you're going to miss 3 months? Hey, welcome. Let's throw you back out there against a team that led the nation in sacks, right? And so they certainly haven't made it easy for Blake Fisher. But, Vince, this is a guy that how he performs in either direction is going to have a big impact on this game.
Well, no question. And we've talked about this a bunch, in shows leading up to this. Notre Dame starting 2 true freshmen at tackle. And I don't think anybody would disagree with us if we said that Joe Alt has been the best pass blocker so far on the season. And I think that that's accurate. I think it's because he's long, he's athletic, he's able to, he's got good feet, etc.
Those are coached very well by the time he got to Notre Dame by his dad, who's a former NFL football player.
No question.
Offensive lineman, I should say.
And his athleticism, everything we just said about Joe Alt's athleticism, you could say about Blake Fisher, right?
In a 330-plus pound package.
and adding him to the right side. And again, and I want people to understand, this is nothing against Josh Lugg, but Josh Lugg was playing injured most of the season.
Which we have found out.
Which we now know. Right? Because we knew that he had some back issues. We now know that he had a knee issue. Like, that is a big deal when you're playing in space. And that's what tackles do. They play in space, right?
They have to have change of direction. They have to be able to plant off one leg and, get out.
That's where the feet are so important.
And
right?
the knee, a healthy knee, because you either have to
plant.
You have to drive off that inside foot. If that's the one that injured, that's going to be a little bit hard. Or if it's the outside foot, you've got to be able to plant and anchor against a power rusher. Or you have to plant and work inside quickly off of a double move or to pick up a blitz. Either way, a guy playing on a knee that's not 100%, he's not an incredible – it's a guy that we thought was probably better as a guard anyway. I mean, that was the shows we were doing back in the spring.
Yep.
Josh Lugg being a guard.
Yep.
And then you put this on him. And you can understand why at times he struggled with some of the better pass rushers.
It makes perfect sense why, maybe he was getting beat around the edge and beat with a double move to the inside, things of that nature, everything that you just explained. So Now you move Blake Fisher over there, and don't expect miracles. Okay, I want to say that
It's not
because
going to look like Ronnie Stanley as a
No.
senior in his
No.
second career game.
no. Now, could he be an upgrade? He could be, right? But that's why we're talking about him, because he is going to impact this game either in a positive direction or in a negative direction, right? And let me also say that if it is in a negative direction, okay, let's say he doesn't light the world on fire like some people are predicting that he's going to do. That doesn't mean that he's a bust, right? I mean, he's still got a long way to go.
That's not even a
Right.
I mean, there's always going to be people that say silly things like that.
Of course.
But
So
here's why this matchup matters, Vince, okay? You look at a pair of freshmen that are being matched up against a defense big picture that led the nation in sacks and tackles for loss. And if you look at their numbers, the thing that's impressive about their numbers, Vince, when you really study them, is there's not like a game where they had absurd numbers that kind of pad the stats.
Right.
They didn't have 18 tackles for loss against Southwest Missouri State. They only had 9. It went 9s. This is their tackle for loss numbers: 9, 6, 7, 7, 10, 7, 4, 7, 12, 11, 13, 9, 11. It was consistency.
Right.
And the game they only had 4. That was against Iowa State, a loss. Again, they lost 24-21.
Right. Yeah.
You look at the same thing with their sack numbers, Vince. There's one game that was kind of higher, but it was really just accumulative. It was 5, 2, 4, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. And then that was during a stretch where Oklahoma State was winning a lot of really close games and lost a game. They had 2 sacks against Iowa State.
Right.
Then it was 1 against Kansas, who stinks. Then it was 8, 7, 5, 6, and 6, right? So there's not like a 12-10 sack game in there. It was a bunch of just really good games. It's a consistency from a pass rush standpoint. You're talking about a defensive line that when we get specific about why it's a challenging matchup, you had 3 defensive ends that had double-digit tackles for loss numbers this season.
Right.
Yep. That is Colin Oliver, who is a true freshman, did not start. I mean, he plays a bunch, but he's not technically a starter.
Right. He's technically second string. Right.
Right. He had 15 tackles for loss. Brock Martin is the starter at that position. He had 12 tackles for loss. Now, they will play together at times as well.
Sure.
And then you had Tyler Lacy, who had 11.5 tackles for loss. Well, and the thing I like about this group, if we're not, obviously not looking at it from a Notre Dame standpoint, just evaluators of college football, it's a very diverse group. You have Colin Oliver, the freshman, who's 6'2", 225, and explosive athletically. Then you have Brock Martin, who's 6'3", 250, a guy that's got a great motor, good athlete, but he's also advanced. He can do a lot of different things.
Right. He's more technical.
Sound.
Yeah.
He's what Andrew Trumbetti should have been at Notre Dame and what we thought he was going to be when he was a freshman. You remember he had a really good freshman year. And then you've got Tyler Lacy, who's 6'4", 295. Completely different player. He's a power player.
Right.
And I think that's the challenge for the Notre Dame freshman offensive lineman, especially a guy like Blake Fisher, because with Joe Alt, you feel like Joe started 6 games. I mean, his first serious action as a tackle was against Cincinnati after Tosh Baker went down and Carmody was hurt. Then he makes his first start against Virginia Tech. So he started, 7 games?
Yeah.
And then played like over 30 snaps or over 20 snaps in another. Plus, he had gotten some tight end snaps.
That's right.
He played a decent
45.
amount of – right. He's played a lot of football. He's going to be up more to game speed. You look at Blake Fisher, though, who hasn't played since the first half of a game on September 4th.
Right.
So it'll be almost 4 months, right? And you look at that and you say, boy, him being up to game speed is a little bit more of a challenge against an explosive athlete like Colin Oliver. You look at a guy that's just kind of a high motor, great leverage, strong guy like Brock Martin, and then a 6'4", 295-pound guy in Tyler Lacy. It's that combination of skills to me that makes this matchup even more challenging. It's not like Blake Fisher has one guy that he's got this is their left end.
Right.
I'm matched up against their left end the whole game. He's going to face, because they do field boundary, he's going to have to face all 3 of these guys, and they all present completely unique challenges, and that's what makes this matchup really important. And if Blake can hold his own, then Notre Dame's going to have a chance to have a lot of success on offense. If he struggles, then 10 other guys could do their job, and it's going to cause problems. That's why that's the first matchup that we thought of when we talked about what one are we going to be watching right away to see how this thing is going to go. We're going to have our eyes on number 54 to outside of the game to just kind of see where he is at.
He was the first one on my list, and it was like, man, do I put him down because it's so obvious? Well, yeah, because that's what the topic of the show is. But it's like, it was the obvious one. I mean, that's the game. I'm not saying the game is going to be decided by the matchup of the two tackles and the ends and all that, but it's really important. It's really important to the success that Notre Dame is going to have offensively, because if they can slow down this pass rush, then it opens up a lot of doors and windows for the Notre Dame offense and Tommy Rees. And that's the key, right? If they're having to deal with those guys in the backfield consistently, it just changes everything that you want to do. Right. And so that's why it's so important. I mean, it's the foundation of what you want to do offensively. You have to be able to get rid of the ball. You have to be able to do things in the backfield. You got to be able to run the ball. All of those different things are going to hinge on what Blake Fisher's doing at right tackle.
And a big part of what's going to happen with Blake Fisher and Joe Alt at the offensive line is what you're going to see at running back.
Yes, this is our position group. Yeah,
right. This is you're facing what I believe is the best defense you faced all year. Now, it's debatable. You can make a case for Cincinnati.
Sure.
And I think the argument for Cincinnati is individually their 3 or 4 best players are better than Oklahoma State's 3 or 4 best players. What to me separates Cincinnati and Oklahoma State is that just top to bottom, Oklahoma State is really dynamic and really just good across the board, even though they may not have the 1 or 2. There's no Ahmad Bradshaw. Right. Ahmad Gardner, on Oklahoma State. As good as those ends are, Myjai Sanders is probably a little bit of a better player. And honestly, they don't even have a DB as good as Colby Bryant. So at the top, Cincinnati. But just 9, 10, 11, and then the depth is definitely Oklahoma State, and the results are Oklahoma State. Then you look at Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was a big physical line. I'll contend, Vince, that if Notre Dame plays Wisconsin in November, that's not a close game. Not because Notre Dame had 2 pick sixes and a kick return.
Because the offense actually does what they needed to do.
They would have taken advantage of the perimeter matchups the way they should have.
Right. They didn't. Correct. I mean, the offense was anemic at best. Correct. In Wisconsin
it was
game.
Some big plays by Kevin Austin. It was a couple really nice plays by Avery Davis up the seam. And then other than that, I mean, no run game to speak of. Offensive line couldn't protect Jack Cohen at all.
No.
I think it'd be a different matchup now. Because Wisconsin doesn't have a lot of great team speed on defense.
Agreed. They're big and physical, but they're not fast.
And incredibly well coached. Oklahoma State is more athletic. Agreed. Also incredibly well coached.
Because in the Big 12, you got to cover more space.
Right.
I mean, and so that makes sense, right? I mean, if you were going to take the names and the colors off of those defenses, I could tell you which one was which by how they play and what conference that they play in, right? I mean, that's what in the Big 12 you have to defend space. You have to defend sideline to sideline. In the Big 10, you don't really need to do that, right? I mean, you need to be big, you need to be physical, you need to be able to shut down run games, that kind of stuff. So it makes sense that these defenses are the way they are. They're just different, right? I mean, that's the big thing.
The matchup for Oklahoma State is more challenging for Notre Dame at this point, because I'm more concerned about the athletic penetrating group now than I am the big physical group.
No question.
I feel like Notre Dame's scheme has gone, because they're doing what we said they should do, the tempo, the perimeter stuff. Those are the things that we think would work so much better against Wisconsin. It's the way that Notre Dame schematically plays. Those things aren't as successful, just impactful against a team like Oklahoma State.
Right.
And that's why it has to now be more about, you have to be really good and productive and make plays. It's just not about, we're just more athletic than you. And so now you have to face this defense without Kyron Williams.
Yeah, true.
And so it's a tremendous opportunity for Logan Diggs and Chris Tyree, and perhaps hopefully Audric Estime.
Yeah, he wasn't on the 2 deep, but I don't think that means anything. I don't think Marcus Freeman has said all 3 guys are going to play.
Right. And so you look at this matchup and you say, I expect estimate a play. I still think this is going to be a Diggs Tyree Diggs situation.
It's going to be like a 1-2-3 punch. You know what I mean? It's like it's going to be those two guys.
Hopefully, it's not one of them dominating the reps the way that Kyren Williams did. And understandably, why Kyren Williams did that. He was a heck of a player. But
sure,
you want to see them say, hey, what are the skills that Chris Tyree brings to the table? What are the skills that Logan Diggs brings to the table? And do a better job of utilizing those skills together.
Yes,
and those are the things that we hope to see. But all the scheming in the world is not, at the end of the day, is those guys have to make plays. So that's why it's a twofold aspect of the backs, which is, number one, we want to see how they're going to be used.
Right.
And number two, can they make plays? And then here's the third part. This is the really interesting one. I think if there's any room to work, they're going to make good runs. I think if used in the pass game, they're going to make some plays. The big question mark I have is going to be against a team that brings pressure, not blitz pickup.
Yeah.
That's the final piece of this puzzle of how do they replace that aspect of what Kyren brings to the table. So this group, to me, Vince, has a chance to have a big impact in this game in definitely in a positive manner, but they've got to protect the football and be good in pass pro for this offense really to work at its best.
Yeah, it's funny because you brought it up as the third aspect of what these backs do, and that's the first aspect that I'm going to be watching because I have faith that when they have the ball in their hands, they're going to be good. I mean, I want to see them expand on Chris Tyree's role. You know what I mean? I want him to get more touches, right? Even if it's
design the run game to better fit what he does.
Absolutely. Correct. And I think you could kind of insert Logan Diggs into the Kyren Williams role, but in a smaller, compact way, if that makes sense. Like you don't need to have him in for the snaps that you had Kyren Williams in.
Right. But so everything you did schematically with Kyren, you can do with Logan is the point you're making.
Exactly. And so I'm hoping that the less snaps that Logan gets, that means more snaps for Tyree, but in a creative way.
Or play them together more.
And that would be fine too. Thing. I would be fine with that, right? And so, but I think they're going to be fine with the ball in their hands. I have all the faith in the world in those two guys. I really do. And Audric as well. I mean, when he showed that when he runs the ball, he can be effective as well.
Right.
It's blitz pick up and pass game. I mean, that's the biggest question mark for me. And I'm not saying it's a question mark like I'm worried about them, like, oh man, I've seen them mess it up so much in the past. It's that they weren't really asked to do it at a volume level like they're going to be asked to do in the Fiesta Bowl. And I mean, it's an unknown, right? And so of all the things that we ask running backs to do in an offense as coaches, that's going to be the biggest thing for me that I'm going to be watching is how they do in blitz pickup. Absolutely.
The other thing for me is because you're talking about two guys who their most career carries in a game is 11. Actually, no, Chris Tyree last year against Boston College had 17. After that, it's 11. He had 11 against Florida State last year and 11 this year against Purdue.
Okay.
Meaning not guys that have carried the ball a ton.
Right.
In Chris Tyree, we haven't seen a healthy, full-speed Chris Tyree all year. So obviously I want to see that. But the big thing is I really think Tyree, if they use him correctly, is a guy that could really be impactful in this game. And I thought we were going to see it last year in the Rose Bowl because early in the game they ran that screen to him and he went for almost 30 yards on it.
Yeah, I was like, okay, here we go.
Really kind of get him going this way and that way against Oklahoma State. I really hope that they utilize him effectively. But Chris Tyree is not a 20-touch guy.
No.
He's never going to be a 20-touch guy. I had someone today say, if they don't get Chris Tyree 20 or plus touches, then you might as well just move him to flanker. And I was like, Kyren Williams had more than 20 carries in a game twice this year.
Right.
That's not the game anymore, right? It's. I remember the year that Georgia had that great backfield of Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel. You remember that in 2017? I remember looking at it and being just shocked at how many times Nick Chubb carried the ball more than 20 times in a game. And thinking, boy, I wouldn't have expected that. Do you know the number of times he carried the ball at least 20 times in a game that season? They played 15 games, 1. And he carried 20 times against South Carolina, right? Because you are using multiple backs. Now, 15 years ago, Nick Chubb would have done that almost every game.
Absolutely.
right? But the
And it
way
would
that
have
the
been like
game
the
is,
one time
right,
he got over 30 like that.
right,
Yeah.
right, because you had that lead back, you ran the ball. Now it's you play multiple players. You
Sure.
get them the ball in space. The touches still need to be there, but it's not carries as like it used to be.
Right. Exactly.
So you've got to get Chris Tyree 10 to 12 touches. Has to get 10 to 12 touches. And then you've got to get Logan Diggs at least 12 to 15 touches. To me, that's where I want to be. And then you'll have Audric Estime maybe in there.
A little
And so I'm
short
talking
yardage
minimums, right?
yeah.
Minimums 10 to 12
Yes.
for Tyree, minimum 12 to 15 for Logan Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think if you're getting that kind of balance and then you've mixed it up to where Tyree has a package, because here's the unique thing about a bowl game, Vince. You don't have to worry about tendencies. You don't have to worry about creating tendencies that your future opponents are going to have to worry about.
That's a good point.
You have no other game. So you can say in this game, Tyree is going to have this package and Logan Diggs is going to have that package because you're not worried about tendencies in either direction. You're not worried about them knowing tendencies. If anything,
Sure.
they know what you're going to run because you kind of run the same stuff. And with Tyree, it's like, okay, he'll run a jet sweep and then the normal run game.
Right.
And then with Diggs, it's just he's going to run your normal package, right? That's the only tendency you have. You don't have to worry about your next opponent figuring that tendency out because Ohio State's not going to be reading too much into this game because
they'll watch it, but it won't be
right?
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, gee, that's what they're going to do now for every single game. You can have some fun with this now. And that's what I want to see Tyree do. That's where I want to see that creativity. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're not talking about creating 12 new plays. It's just when Chris Tyree is in the game, it's okay to play to his strengths.
Absolutely.
When Logan Diggs is in the game, it's okay to play to his strengths because you don't have to worry about having too much on your plate for an entire season because you're building towards this one game. And that's what I want to see. And if they do that, then these backs need to step up and be successful. That's going to be a big part of the game. So next, Vince, let's talk about the wide receiver position.
Yeah.
And we could pick several guys. We could go Braden Lindsey.
Yeah, I was tempted. I was tempted to go Braden Lindsey because I kind of an honorable mention.
He may have 2 touches, but they could be huge plays.
And that's why he was kind of an honorable mention for me because it was, okay, what is the role of Braden Lindsey going to be? Can you expand on his role a little bit to make him more dynamic?
Or is this the game he finally gets a chance to make that big play down the field? That's the other thing is the thing about Braden Lindsey is what we said during the summer, during the spring, back in the winter is he's not a 6 to 8 touch guy. It's just you need to get him at least 3 or 4 touches and then do it in different ways and 30 snaps and those type of things. But find a way to get him the ball. If you feel you have a read on when they like the blitz, maybe that's the time you run a little bit of a tunnel screen there to Braden Lindsey.
Exactly.
Do something to get him going. You could say the same thing about Lorenzo Styles. Everything we just said about Braden Lindsey, we could say the exact same thing about Lorenzo Styles. He doesn't need 8 touches to make this thing impactful. He just needs to go out and he could be a big play guy. That's the big key. And so you look at this matchup and you say, boy, one of those guys has to, make some plays. But at the end of the day, the guy that we went with is the one that we're really going to be keen on is Kevin Austin.
The alpha. That's it. Look, we all know that Kevin Austin has a decision to make after this game and, all of those things that go along with what happens after a bowl game and et cetera, et cetera. But for me, it's okay. If you want to leave for the NFL, who are you? Like, can you rise up in a big game? Right. And I'm not sure, right? I'm not.
Yeah, because he's played. We could argue they've played. The big games they've played this year. Obviously, I would argue Florida State was one because Florida State had some high expectations.
Absolutely.
Night game, Sunday night,
all of it.
Played well that game.
Mm-hmm.
Purdue was a big game because it was a really quality opponent, and he did not play well in that game. Wisconsin was a big game. He stepped up and played really well. Had 2 touchdowns in that game. Then you come back the next week and it's Cincinnati, and he didn't play well.
Right.
I would argue USC was a big game because it's a big rivalry game. It's a night game, and he did not play well that game. He had 2 big drops in that game. After that, however, Kevin really started to be steady.
Sure.
Once the steadiness came, then all of a sudden the dynamic aspects came. So once he started finding some consistency, then he was able to build on that and had over 100 yards and 2 games over 100 yards in November.
Sure.
So to your point, Vince, is what are we getting, the USC, Cincinnati, Purdue version of Kevin Austin?
Right.
Or are we getting the Florida State, Wisconsin, Navy, Stanford, Georgia Tech version of Kevin Austin?
Right, exactly.
That's the question mark.
Because look, Notre Dame needs to have somebody that's going to go out and be like, look, I'm the guy, throw me the ball. You know what I mean? And you have to have confidence that when that happens, he's going to make plays.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we all know that he's got the athletic capability of doing it. He's got the tools, right? And it's fun to watch him play. And I agree that he's been more steady lately. And I love that about him. But this is a huge spot, right? He's going to need to step up and he's going to need to be good in order for this offense to take the next step.
Because here's the concern I have about this matchup. And this is why, because the premise of the show is who are we watching to really see if they're going to step up and have a big impact. The reason I'm going with Kevin Austin is because when Kevin Austin has struggled this year, more often than not, it's when you're playing a defense that has big corners because he doesn't play with good technique.
Yeah, right.
I don't blame him for that. I don't think he's coached to play with good technique.
But it's just a fact.
It's a fact. He struggles at the line of scrimmage against big corners. Even USC, who doesn't have great corners, but they have big corners.
But they're big, yeah.
Chris Steele's a bigger guy. The other kid that they have is a bigger guy. He's like 6'1.5", 6'2". They've got bigger corners. Isaac Taylor Stewart. And North Carolina had some bigger corners, but one of their bigger corners was out. Kyler McMichael was out, and Kevin took advantage of that, right? When he was beating people, it wasn't Tony Grimes. It wasn't Kyler McMichael because Kyler McMichael didn't play. It was their smaller corner. This is Kevin's chance to say, hey, you're playing big corners again. Show us how you've improved. We've talked about how the offense has improved, and they got to show that they've improved. Kevin is a big part. He is sort of a microcosm of the offense. When he's good, the offense is good, and when he's not good, the offense is not good, but he really improved in the second half of the year. That's where the microcosm aspect comes into play.
Absolutely.
Is that real improvement, or is it because he hasn't played anybody or any good corners like the guys he went up against earlier in the year that gave him some problems? And so when you look at this matchup against Christian Holmes, who's 6'1", 205, when you look at the matchup against Bernard Converse, it's 6'1", 200. And then one of the backup corners who's going to play a lot, Corey Black, is 6 foot, 185. Those are the kind of players that have given him problems. When he's matched up in the slot, you've got Tanner McAllister, who's 5'11", 195, very physical player. You've got Colby Harvell Peel, who's 6 foot, 207. There may be times he's matched up against them on vertical routes when Kevin lines up in the slot. So they're going to see the film and say, that guy doesn't like to get jammed.
So
and they're going to jam him.
Yeah,
exactly. They're going to jam him.
It's called good scouting.
Kevin's not ready for that, it's going to hurt the offense. If Kevin's ready for that and he's worked on his craft and he's ready to beat it, then he's going to have some big plays.
Absolutely.
And if Kevin Austin gets going in this game, Oklahoma State's in trouble.
Agreed.
Because now your safeties have to help out. Right now, they're going to go into this game saying, we trust our corners enough to match up with Kevin. He may make a play or two, but he's not taking the game over because he hasn't really shown he can do that against anybody like us, right? So we're gonna have to figure out ways to protect our corners now because this guy's whooping their butts.
Exactly. And then when you do that opens up the seam. Hello, Michael Mayer. Hello, running
Styles.
backs,
Hello, run. Yes, exactly.
All of those things.
And then you're free safety because they like to do so. Oklahoma State shows a lot of too high, meaning two safeties deep, and then they like to roll. So one guy will go middle of the field. If that guy is now keen on Mayer to Austin, now who's covering number 0?
Exactly.
And that's where we kind of get into it. So, but it all to me boils down to number 4 has to step up and have a big game.
Right.
Kevin Austin needs to come back to college. I'm sorry. I know the injury thing is a concern for him, but the reality is if he comes back, continues to show the growth as a young man and the growth as a player, he can not only be great next year, but his draft stock is going to go way up. Because some say, well, he's going to test well, and that's going to raise his draft stock. Imagine if he tested well a year from now after a 1,000-yard season.
Because he still has all the games that you just talked about, that he didn't play very well.
Right.
And
next
no
year,
matter
you'll
how
have
well
Ohio
he tests,
State, you'll have Clemson, you'll have,
exactly.
Exactly.
You're going to have plenty of opportunities.
He's not going to have enough good you were getting ready to say it, Vince, and I cut you off. I apologize. You were getting ready to say he doesn't have enough really good film yet.
Exactly.
And there's just as much bad film in big games as there's going to be good film, no matter what he does on Saturday.
Right. Exactly.
Next year, he'd come back. The point being, for this game, I hope that this game makes this decision tough for him because he's that good. And then ultimately, I hope he makes the right decision.
Absolutely.
I don't know if he will or won't. Of the 5 guys that I look at as making a decision, he's the one I'm most
worried that he's
thinking is going to leave.
Yeah, me too.
Between him, Foskey, Adam Iola, Jarrett Patterson, and Cam Hart.
I just have no intel whatsoever. This is my gut. Like, he was part of the press conference earlier this week, and he's like, yeah, that's a decision I'm going to make late. Like, I don't know. It's just the feeling that I get is that he's not going to come back, and I just feel like that's going to be not a great decision. But he's got to do what's best. If this game
makes it obvious to him that he needs to come back, that's not good for Notre Dame.
No, it's not.
This game, you know what I mean?
It's kind of a like, well, do I want him to do well? Yes, the answer
I would
is
say yes,
I
because
well.
If Kevin Austin blows up in this game and Notre Dame wins and he leaves, that's a bummer. But this is why you recruit receivers every year, because there's this kid named Deion Colsey who you coach up and get ready to play. There's this kid named Tobias Merriweather that's going to show up this summer that you can coach up and get ready to play. You don't want to lose Kevin Austin, because Kevin Austin could be a star next season.
No question.
But if he leaves because he dominates this game and Notre Dame wins, okay, I can live with that. Yeah, but hopefully he dominates, they win, and he comes back. But you hope that this decision, this game, makes it tough on him, because if Kevin Austin goes off, especially early, it makes everything else work better.
Yes.
And that's a big key.
Question.
And Notre Dame, the receivers as a whole, and we'll get more into the keys to the game, but they are going to have to be able to make some plays down the field to take pressure off the run game. Because as we've mentioned, I think in just about every show where we've talked about the Oklahoma State defense, we've mentioned at some point, man, their DBs are really good against the run.
Right, absolutely.
If you can take those guys out of the run game because they're afraid of you running by them, it's huge for your run game.
No question.
So that's another reason why Kevin Austin is a big part of this matchup for us.
And I was going to say that the biggest recruiter of Kevin Austin is going to need to be Tyler Buckner, going into next year, or even Drew Pine or whatever, because it makes my job as the quarterback so much easier if number 4 is out there. And that's nothing against the other guys on the depth chart. Right. But if Kevin Austin's out there, I'm feeling a lot better, and that kind of slides us into our next guy. As to who we're going to talk about next.
And that's kind of. Not Tyler Buckner as much, but the quarterback position. It slides us into our next position, not so much the exact same player.
Close.
And that's Jack Cohen.
Absolutely.
And I think that when Jack Cohen is on, as simple as this, even in some of these games where they lost and he didn't play well overall, when he would get that series or two where he was just getting rid of the ball quickly and being assertive. It's like, for example, go watch the first drive against Cincinnati and stop it right before the interception.
It was a great drive.
He was money on that drive. I mean, just threw a great third down ball for a first down, threw a great fourth down ball to Michael Mayer for a first down. And he was getting the ball out quick. He was getting it out on time. He looked really good. You look at the first series against Wisconsin, then you come out the second series, and he is getting the ball out to Avery Davis on a 2nd and 20 on the seams and just really looking good. And we would see it at times, but not consistently. You look at the Florida State game when Jack got hot in that game and just shredded Florida State. You look at what he did in the last 2 games. I mean, Notre Dame averaged 50 points in their final 2 wins of the season, correct?
True. Yeah.
I mean, wasn't it? It was 55-0 and 45-0. Am I correct on those scores?
I believe that's accurate. Yeah.
And Jack Cohen threw for over 300 yards, I believe, in both games, or at least close to it. Yeah, 100 points in both of those games. I believe Jack Cohen averaged about 300 yards those 2 games. Yeah, it was 285 in the first one, 345 in the second one.
So
he averaged it was over 300 yards a game. He averaged over 10 yards per completion.
Right.
Or per attempt. Now, of course, that was against Georgia Tech and Stanford, who won a combined 6 games.
Sure, get that.
This is a different animal. The point being, no matter who they play, when Jack is protected, decisive, accurate, and aggressive, this offense has been really hard to stop. Even against some of the better teams, it's just he would go away from that. And that's going to be a key for Jack. This is your last go of it, buddy.
Absolutely.
You got nothing to lose.
Absolutely.
Go out there and let it rip, because if Jack Cohen plays well, and again, reason we went with him last, because for a large degree, a quarterback's only as good as the supporting cast. If Jack Cohen's ready to rock and roll, but Blake Fisher and Joe Alt aren't getting the job done, Caden Madden's not getting the job done, or the receivers are dropping balls, or Kevin Austin's not getting open, or the running backs aren't doing blitz pickup, then it doesn't matter how good Jack Cohen is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if everybody does their job to some degree, and Jack Cohen is the hot Jack Cohen,
he's locked in. Yeah,
that this is going to be a good day for Notre Dame.
Absolutely, because we've seen, and you touched on it a little bit, and yes, second half of the season when they kind of adjusted their philosophy a little bit, get the ball out fast, quick decision making, things of that nature, a little RPO action, things like that. That's when Jack Cohen has really hit his stride, and he is playing with a confidence level right now that is through the roof. I mean, there were games where we would talk, some of it on the air, some of it off the air, about how they had a bigger role for Tyler Buchner planned, right?
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't take Jack off the field because he was playing so well, right? And had nothing to do with the competition that they were playing against. It was just the fact that he was dialed in. And look, he's playing with a tremendous amount of confidence right now. And if he can parlay that into this game, in the Fiesta Bowl, under the bright lights and all that fun stuff, all those cliches, right? Then this offense is going to be just fine, right? But it's the trigger man. If he's not feeling it, if he's not locked in, then you get the question marks. Okay, do they go to Tyler Buchner? Do they go, do they try something different? Do they lean more on the run game? All of these different things if he's not dialed in. This is why he's so important to this. I mean, he's got to be dialed in. He's got to play with confidence.
I'm looking at his numbers here, Vince, starting like from the Virginia Tech game on.
Okay.
And it's kind of absurd, really, when you think about it. So for the last 7 games of the year, including Virginia Tech, Jack Cohen completed 73.8% of his passes. That's the last 7 games of the year.
Okay, wow.
So if you look at the last 7 games, he threw 168 passes in the last 7 games.
Okay.
44 of those were incomplete. I can count off top of my head 7 or 8 drops out of that group. Because that includes the USC game.
Easily.
And that is a really, really nasty. I mean,
but it's playing not only with confidence,
that's big time football.
But he's playing well. I mean, it's one thing to be confident, okay, but it's another thing to then produce what your confidence is telling you that you can do. Because look, Tommy Rees played real confident too, right? When he played at Notre Dame, but it wasn't always fruitful on the field. Okay, so it's a combination of confidence and then precision,
right?
And
because when he's confident and protected, we know he's going to make those good decisions, and. And it's not a coincidence that Notre Dame is 7-0 during that stretch, and 6-0 in the games where Jack really played well. Because he had some struggles early against Virginia Tech. He had a couple misses that he should have hit, and comes off the bench late, and that's really what kind of sparked this run for him. But the next 6 games, yes, they played bad teams, but you know who else wasn't very good? Toledo, Florida State. Purdue wasn't a great team. Virginia Tech wasn't that good, and Notre Dame struggled to beat all those teams.
Right.
You come out in the final 6 games and Jack starts playing to his potential, and all of a sudden Notre Dame has one competitive game the whole stretch, and that was against North Carolina, a game where, Notre Dame's defense is the reason they didn't play great. I mean, scored 44 points that game.
Right.
So you're just destroying people down the stretch, and a big part of it was that's when Jack Cohen started to get good. And now, of course, we had the philosophical changes and all that kind of stuff. But what we haven't seen is what this offense looks like against a great defense. Because let's be honest. Since the loss against Cincinnati, Notre Dame has not played a good defense. Virginia Tech is the closest thing you can get to that, and they're barely a top 40 defense. As we pointed out in a previous show, Navy, of the final 6 opponents, Navy was the only one of those opponents to not rank outside the top 100 in points allowed per game at 82. But they did what they're supposed to do against those teams, right? They scored a lot of points and blew them out. And so Jack Cohen is a guy that here's how I'm going to be in the stands. I'm going to be watching the game. Here's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to be watching Blake Fisher set, and then I'm going to get my eyes right on Jack Cohen because I want to see his confidence. I want to see if he's getting rid of the ball quickly. I want to see, just kind of where he is and his just beat the blitz, get the ball out quickly, be accurate, good ball placement, protect the football. And if we see good Jack Cohen early, Notre Dame's going to be able to get into a rhythm, because I think that's a key to this game is you've got to come out and you've got to play well early.
Yeah.
You've got to get into an early rhythm, get Oklahoma State on their heels a bit, and Jack's going to be a big part of that. So as we look at this and this matchup, those are the guys that we feel really have to step up and bring their A game. Now, again, everybody has to play well to be the number 9 team in the country that's 11-2. and has one of the 3 or 4 best defenses in the country. You can't have those 4 guys playing great and the 7 other guys stinking, right? You all understand that, right? Like, they've all got to play well to a degree, but those are the 4 guys who playing at their best, in my opinion, could have the biggest impact. Because the Michael Mayer plays at his best, he may only have 3 catches for 9 yards because they're going to double and triple team him. And this just, it is what
There's
it is.
nothing you can do. Right.
And so that's one of those games where he could have a big impact by not having a big impact statistically.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we kind of get at, is where for Kevin Austin to have a big impact, it's going to have to be statistically, because he's not going to impact the game early because of their obsession with keeping him from taking the game.
You can only double team so many guys. Okay.
And I don't see them watching film being like, yeah, 87's pretty good. And, number 0s, he's pretty explosive. Yeah, number 21. But we got to stop 4. I don't see them doing
Not
that
yet. Next year, this time, that may be the conversation that we're having.
I hope so. But, look, they're going to have enough faith in their corners to say, we trust you against 4.
Sure.
Kevin Austin has to make them pay for that.
Absolutely.
And then it's up to Jack Cohen to make sure the ball's getting out there. And that's going to be the key. So, Vince, that's going to do it for this edition of the sort of the podcast of just the players that we think for Notre Dame really have to stay locked in. So, hope you enjoyed that show. If you are listening now, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review. But make sure that you look out here real soon. It may be out by the time you listen to this. If not, it'll be out very shortly. But make sure you look for the defensive version of this podcast. So, for Vince, I'm Brian. We'll talk to you again very, very soon.